Welcome back to Stockton Junction. So today I'm trying to get the back scene area carried on working on because I want to start building, putting the tracks and the platforms in, and I will need all this back area done before I start all that. So this is going to be obviously the train station up on here. This is going to be the car park. So the first thing I've done is put in a piece of pavement at the right width for the road. That'll be the car park entrance. The car park will also, I might continue it on further, or I might actually put something else in along there. I'm thinking about a little set of allotments, maybe all the way along, or some along there. I haven't decided yet. It's not a very wide space, so I can't do too much. So I might continue the car park up to, say, about there, and then have some allotments going up along there. So I haven't decided yet, but I'm going to do this part of it to start with. But I think I definitely continue the car park up a little bit longer, just to make it a bit bigger, because you'd have quite a biggish car park at a train station. And so the first thing I did was I did some research, because I wanted a barrier between the road and the car park, but I didn't want a big fence because I don't want to detract from the other street furniture and other bits, road signs and all that sort of stuff that will be going along the road in the very near future. Obviously I've still got all the lighting to put, street lights to put in and that sort of thing. I might put a couple of trees on this side, but I don't actually think I'll bother with trees, actually, no. But I've still got other street furniture to put in place. So I remembered back in the 80s seeing this sort of railing, and I did some research and actually went somewhere where I know that there's still some about, and got some measurements, and I've made this one to go in here. It's 3D printed, as you can see there. I have noticed that I haven't finished painting it all there on the bars, so I've got to come around with the paintbrush and just tidy those up later. Anyway, these will be available for anyone that wants them later on, but I'm going to first off start by getting all this railing in place, because I want to do a similar thing to what I did in the farm. I want to use the powders and that to make a sort of gravelly, muddy style car park, like an unkept car park, because in the 80s they weren't always tarmacked and nice. Sometimes they were all rubbish. In fact, I remember one very distinctively. And there's going to be a little entrance here, hence this piece. I shall cut this off. This stuff's quite modular, so excuse me, I've left it like that on the end, and there is a tiny recess on there, but you can't really see it, and you just literally, you can put them in, line them up and glue them in place like so, and that looks like one complete unit. But also if you want something like this, so there, I'll just trim it to the length to give me the gap I want. About there will probably be right, and I'll just glue it in place, stuck to the end of there. So they're not bad. I mean, they're quite flexible if you want to adjust the length. If you say you've got a whole length you want to do and it's slightly out, you can always trim this end very slightly on each piece, just to make them a bit shorter by the time you get to the end of the length, just to make them fit perfectly. In fact, I didn't even trim anything, I haven't measured it, and it's actually going to be the perfect length for what I needed. So yeah, I'm quite happy with this. So I'm going to continue with this, and then I'm going to put some flocking around the edges, because when I put down the all the powders, we don't want the water seepage to go through and into the card that's for the pavements, because that will just then start staining and lifting and stuff. So I'm going to do that a little barrier between the two, so to speak. I think that will look quite good. But anyway, I'll show you more as I get through the next stages. So I've got all the barriers and the pavements in, and I've put the fencing with the edging. And the reason I'm doing all of this edging here is because of how I'm going to do the car park area. I need to make sure that none of the glue seeps through and onto the pavements as they're carred and they'll damage. So I've got my sign there to go across the entranceway, and you can see it comes up to there. So I've got quite a large car park area, obviously would be needed. I know that I've got a multi-storey car park right down that end, but even so, most of the train stations would have had a car park, and the multi-storey might have been built long after. So I'm going to get this finished. The first job I'm doing now is creating some like potholes. It's going to be a very unkept, rough ground car park rather than a nice neat car park with lines, etc. I want it to be, you know, rough looking. So the next job is what I've done there. So all I'm going to do, I will place the camera down and so you can have a good look at what I'm doing. So all I'm doing at the moment, there's going to be 3 stages to building the car park. So I'm just making some outer pothole lines with glue, as you can see there. I'm using my normal ballast, which is quite larger, and I'm just putting it on so that it sticks to that glue, and I'll leave that to dry, and then I'll hoover up the excess. So I'm going to do a few quite big potholes, really. It's very unkept. A few small ones. That one can be just as is. And then I just need to wait for this lot to dry so that I can do the next part. Also, a little tip for you guys. So when I was doing all the gluing along there, as normal, I just run a bead of glue along, but you can't really, it doesn't really get into all the edges. Now you could use a paintbrush, and then you've got to wash the paintbrush out. I use a scrap of card, it's just a piece of card, trim it to a bit of an angle, and then when you've got the glue in, you can just use it to manipulate the glue around. When it's finished, just wipe the glue off the end there so it doesn't go all clumpy, and then you can reuse this a few times before you throw it away. Just good idea for an old scrap of card. And obviously you can make a smaller point or a larger if that's more needed, but it does certainly make the job quite easy. Just going to wipe a bit of that away. I don't want it quite so wide. Oh, you can't. That's off camera, that bit, I'm afraid. So I'm doing a few more pothole holes further up the car park quickly, and then I'll show you the next stage once these are dried. Well, welcome back to the next stage. So for this one, I'm going to be using this fine ballast, which is N-gauge ballast. And the next job, so where these small holes, where I've left holes in the centre, we're going to fill those with some lighter gravel to sort of to replicate the bottoms of the holes. just going to fill all these holes up. Just going to fill up these little screw head holes and just put some other bits around as well. At this point I could add some more bits and pieces here and there, which I will be adding some more after the next stage anyway. Yep, so started the next stage, which is the tile grout, which I've got some there. I'm using a lid and a bit of tights. I could do with a smaller lid really to more precise application, but I couldn't find one. And all we're doing is gently shaking it out. I might have to put some on by hand, because getting to the edges of some of these bits is going to be quite tricky. As you can see, we're just going to shake it all on like so. I'll come back to you in a minute when I've done all this. So I've covered it all in the tile grout. As you can see, I've got some interesting patterns and bits. So how I created these I'll show you in a minute. And so just put it there, the camera there for you. So what I can do is you can do that, and then if you were to shake some more powder. Oh, I've run out of powder in my thing, hang on 2 seconds, sorry about that. So what we're doing is we're going to create a ridged area just by doing this. In fact, I need to put a bit more on the area, but you can see the outline of the ridge now. There we go. Just going to take some more off. And that's created, sorry, I didn't realise it was out of order, out the area. So there's created some ridges in areas, and then what we can do with that, we can either fill it with some very of the fine stuff, or you can do another sprinkling over the top, which will create a thinner layer. It will still create the same pattern. Just do one more small one here. I need to build up a couple of layers, so what I'm going to do, I'll just move the camera over a little bit so it's got a better angle. So I'm just going to put a bit more on, and then take some off, and then a final dusting to cover the bottom. There we go, and that's created a nice imprint hole. So now all we need to do is cover all of this with spray it with isopropyl alcohol. I'm not even going to use glue because the isopropyl alcohol will react with the tile grout and it will just harden anyway, and it should hopefully get a few cracks in it as well, which is why I do it that way, because it tends to crack up a little bit as well. So it's going to look quite good. Once it's all dried, we're going to give it a bit of a paint over as well. So as you can see, I started spraying it. All I'm using is one of these little spray bottles which had a hair product in. I literally went and bought the hair product and got rid of it just to get the spray bottle, because it's really fine. What you don't want is a heavy mist, because it will move the tile grout around. As you can see, all this is doing is really gently misting, and keep going and just until the top's filled, wet, so there's no powder residue showing at all. I'm not going right to the edges too much, because I can paint where the wood is, that won't matter, and I don't want to get too much of this powder in these areas here. I'll hoover those up, what's there, and I'll show you it in a few minutes. So I've got the sort of effect I'm after, and as you can see, it's already starting to build cracks, and all we've done is spray it with isopropyl alcohol. That'll be on the thicker sections where the cracks come. You will get, and you've got a few pothole marks there where droplets did come out, so it's all good effect. But once this is all painted up, I don't think it'll look too bad. I've just got to decide what colour to go for, whether to go for more of a muddy old dirt car park, or dirt and with a bit of stone where it had gravel and stuff, or go for an old tarmac one with bits of potholes and things. I haven't decided fully yet, so we'll wait and see how the effect comes out first when it's dried. But I'm already happy with how it is coming, and it's looking good, so I'll see you in a bit. Right, so after I put the isopropyl alcohol on, I've done a base of glue, just the same as the track glue, a 50-50 PVA water mix, and obviously I've got to let that dry. That will take a day or so, and then we'll come back and start painting it. And that's why I wanted the little bit of border between. As you can see, the glue has soaked through to the greenery, so I might have to touch that up a bit, but I'm planning on putting bits around the edges there anyway, so we'll come back once this is dry and do the next stage. So it's all dried. We'll see, I put glue down after on it, and it's all dried perfectly, nice and hard, and I've started painting it. Now I've made a mixture up of, because I make a bulk colour up for the roads, I've made a mixture up and lightened it with some white paint, and it will dry a lot lighter than it shows, as the darker stuff does. It's much darker when it's wet, this stuff. Yeah, so I'm going to paint it all with this grey to start with, and just to be aware, so I'm just getting my paintbrush pot, so I've made up a thing. And just one quick thing, so if you're putting on paint like this, when you're doing something like this, one thing you don't want is brush marks, and obviously you want to make sure you can get into all these bits. So what I tend to do is stipple like that over after I've brushed. It just removes any brush marks off the flat surface. Like there's brush marks. If you stipple, it just gets rid of them. It's really good way of just covering up any brush marks, and I want it all sort of like, as you can see, lumpy bumpy, so it's looking really good. I'm quite liking it. So once I start getting some other colours and some washes over that, it'll really highlight all the textures. I have aimed to do this similar to a car park. I looked at various old car parks, and I found one that was just literally old, very pale grey like this, with bits of weeds and things, and it was just all dried, stone and dusty stone, so it looks quite good. So maybe with a bit of brown washes and some other bits of colour in there, it will look quite good, I think. So I'm going to get this finished, and when it's dried we'll come back and start adding some other colours. So as you can see, I've started on the next coating, which is this. It is a MIG deep grey, and from a distance it's still wet, so it's not brilliant, but if you can look closely you can see it's starting to bring all of the textures up now. And what I will do, I'll just place the camera and give you a little show of how I'm applying this. So one thing I don't do, so when I put it on I don't load the brush, I scrape some off. I will brush at the edges like that, but then what we don't want to be doing is brushing like this too much, because you can get brush marks. I mean, it's not too bad, but on the less surfaces I've found that the best way is to dab with the flat side of the brush, because we don't want to brush it away from all the grains. We want to let it sit into like the grains that are there. That's how it will bring up the detail better. It does take a while, but this is just the first base, and then we've got some other bits, colours to add, and some dry powders to put on afterwards as well. Now if you get a spot like that where it's darker and you seem got an obvious line, if you just keep tapping, it will blend the two together. Obviously you want to do the whole section in one go, not leaving it to fully dry, or otherwise you will find it harder to blend it. And then I'm going to move to the next section the next colours straight away. Paintbrush hair or something stuck in there, I don't know how that got in there. Anyway, I will continue this bit and then I'll show you the next stage. Right, so I'm continuing with the washes, and I'm now using an AK wash, which is aircraft engine, which is just a browny grimy colour really, and I'm just going over some of the more prominent lumps that have got nice textures, just to sort of bring out the texture a bit. And I'll just I'm not overloading the brush, I don't want too much on. I'm just sort of putting it in different areas, not in any one particular place. Any areas where there's still lines with the grey, I'm just blending a bit of this in, just to, it's about giving different tones across the whole area really. should just do just adding a bit extra to the really high areas, because it does tend to thin out and disappear a bit. It'll blend in and stuff, so actually that one's quite good. I like that one. And some in this dip. Right, I'm liking that so far. So I just finished with that one, and then what I am also going to add is a little bit of green here and there, just to represent some, which I don't know how good this one's going to be, so I'm going to give it a little tester. In fact, it looks a bit thick. Yeah, I'm going to wipe quite a lot of this off. Yeah, I don't think I'll bother with the green. I'm not liking that one so much. It's the wrong colour green. I couldn't find my other green. And the last one that I've got to put on is fresh engine oil, which is a MIG one, fresh engine oil there. So, and we're literally just going to put a couple of little dabs here and there, just to represent some more where the cars might be parked. And then, as you see, I put a bit too much on there, so I can just dab at it and wipe it back on the bottle. And it will take some back off. Perfect. And as you can see, it's already starting to disappear and blend in. It does that quite quickly. That's why we're working through the colours in one go rather than you know, letting each section fully dry. Actually adds a nice tone colour to that. I quite like that. Blend that in a bit. That one's fine, I'll leave that one. So now I am going to just let this dry off. up here, and I think that will do. So I'm happy with that so far, but we're going to not finish there. We will be adding powders. I'll just give you a little show through of how it's looking. But it's a bit dark still. That's why I used the lighter base, because this is all dark washes. So now the next job will be to lighten it up again, but leaving some of the dark undertones showing through. And for that I'm going to have a go at using these two MIG products, which is rubble and concrete. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave this to dry completely. I'm going to give it a quick spray over with the matte varnish just to seal those colours in, and then we'll do some dry brushing with these two just to lighten up the tones of the car park and bring it to life completely. I will see you shortly. So for the next stage I'm using the MIG Pigments Rubble and putting some on the brush. I'm taking quite a bit off because obviously it sticks quite thickly in the brush and I don't want it too thick on. Just a little bit at a time. I'm using a really old brush that's all splayed out as well, which is quite good for applicating powders like this. And this starts to give it the dusty, sort of like worn look that I'm after. I haven't decided if I'm going to use any of the concrete powder because I'm quite liking the way this is looking already, so I might not actually use any. I'm giving it quite a vigorous rub to blend it in. I'll give you a quick show. So that's before the rubble, and then this is after. You think that gives it a really good old car park look. There's something that's sort of old and not been maintained very well, which is exactly what I was going for. So I'm going to continue doing all of this side here, and I'll show you the results at the end. So I've just given it another coat, that's why it's darkened up, of the Rail Match matte varnish. This is an enamel which I used on purpose because I've been using oil-based washes. It will lighten up as it dries, but that's it so far, and it's looking really good. So we'll show you it when I've done that, when it's dried, and once I start putting a few more details, and then we're going to start adding some grass and bits and pieces around the edges and that sort of stuff to blend it in a bit more. And the next job is to get the road done in this area and start getting some street furniture, lighting and all that sort of stuff in place. Right, so just a quick update. The varnish has now dried completely, as you can see, completely matte. There are a few patches that are a bit darker. That was to be expected, because when you varnish powders, they always come up darker than what they looked before. So one thing I'm going to do over, like here, I'll leave a few of the darker spots, but this big piece here and maybe a little bit of there, I'm just going to put a bit more of the rubble on dry and leave it. Obviously it will not be sealed in, but it's fine, you know, it's not going to be touched once all the bits and pieces are in place. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to start, actually no, before I do that, I'm going to start putting the greenery around the edges, because obviously if I'm using static grass I'm going to have to hoover up the excess, so I'll put the powders down after actually finishing touch. So we're going to get on and do some of the bits of grass and other bits around the edge, put in things like ticket machines and signage and that sort of stuff. And for the next video I'm going to be working on this area of the town scene as well. I have got another new product that's coming, and you're going to be pretty amazed at how no one else, well, I mean, I'm sure somebody has modelled them by making them themselves, but the product that I'm going to be putting in, you're going to be thinking, why has no one made this? Because it's something that every street scene should have, and that I'm going to be putting it in. So I hope you'll enjoy the video for the next one when I start doing this area. I'm also going to be putting in zebra crossing here somewhere as well, actually probably over here I think, and I'll be putting in some of the bits of street furniture and stuff like that as well, and trying to complete this section of the town scene so that I can then move on to that section with the plans for up there. I've got quite a few, and basically I need to get this area all finished before I can work on the area in front of it, to get the last track work down and start putting platforms in, that sort of thing, because I don't want to be leaning across them and breaking anything that's in front. So I hope you enjoyed the video so far, and I'll show you the results of the last bits, finishing touches, very shortly. So I've still got some signage to do, but I'm quite happy with the effect at the moment, and need a lot more cars. I haven't got many. These I move around at the moment to different areas as I'm needing some cars. I do need to buy a lot, but I think the car park looks pretty good at the moment. There's going to be another fence behind that one there, tall fencing for the area that's going to be used there next. But yeah, I'm quite happy with the sort of rundown look of it. And then there's another little parking meter there with a little gap through where they can walk through here to the train station. So I'm going to leave it at that for now. I do need to make up some signage etc., which I'll do later on. There's no rush on that bit, and I'm going to start work on this back area here now. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all soon.